Stillness is the secret posture of the soul that allows one to begin perceiving the reality of the divine. In the stillness of the body and the quieting of the mind, a different kind of awareness begins to rise. This awareness is not built on logic or information, but on presence, a calm knowing that there is something beyond the surface of ordinary life. In stillness, distractions fall away, the rush of thoughts, the pull of emotions, and the demands of the outside world begin to fade. What remains is the core of being, the inner chamber where the divine voice gently echoes. This voice does not shout, it does not argue, it waits patiently until we have silenced the rest of the world enough to hear it. It is in this calm, sacred space that we start to know, not with the mind but with the spirit, that there is a holy God who is near, who is present, and who desires to be known. Stillness is not easy in a world of movement. Everything around us urges activity, urgency, and noise. From morning until night, we are bombarded with sound, screens, schedules, and stimulation. We begin to believe that motion is the measure of progress, and that silence is a waste of time. But in truth, stillness is not stagnation. It is alignment. It is when we pause that we realign with the deeper flow of life, with the eternal rhythm of the divine. It is not the hurried soul that finds God, but the quiet one. Not the one who shouts the loudest prayers, but the one who waits in reverent silence. The holy cannot be forced into visibility. It reveals itself in the emptiness we make by letting go. In stillness, we are stripped of illusion. The layers of self, deception, pride, fear, and restlessness fall away. We come face to face with who we really are. We discover that underneath all our striving is a yearning for something pure, something beyond, something holy. Stillness is the mirror that reflects not just what we are but what we were created for. It is in this clarity that the soul becomes open to encounter. This openness is not emotional hype or mystical fantasy. It is the simple, raw, vulnerable readiness to receive. To receive not answers but presence, not control but surrender, not clarity of all things but connection to the one who holds all things. The path of stillness leads inward before it leads upward. To know a holy God is to stop reaching outward with desperation and to turn inward with humility. The divine is not discovered in the noise, but in the sacred hush of silence. When the world outside is loud and chaotic, the temple within becomes even more precious. It becomes the sanctuary where the holy can be touched, not with hands, but with awareness. This inner awareness begins to sharpen the senses of the spirit. You begin to notice the divine not only in moments of prayer, but in the ordinary. The breath, the breeze, the light on the wall, the sound of leaves moving in the wind. Everything begins to speak when you are still enough to listen. Stillness teaches patience. It teaches that the holy cannot be rushed. You cannot demand revelation. You can only wait, open, and ready. This waiting is not idle. It is full of reverence. It is the same waiting a servant gives to a king, not anxious, not casual, but watchful. When the heart waits like this, the holy begins to reveal itself in subtle yet undeniable ways. You begin to sense that God has always been near, but your noise drowned him out. Now, with the stillness growing, your perception changes. You don't need to search the skies or cross the oceans. You begin to see that the holy is already here, waiting to be known. Stillness removes the need for performance. You do not have to prove yourself to a holy God. You do not have to impress him with words or deeds. You simply have to be. Stillness invites you to come as you are. To be naked of pretense, to be clothed in honesty, in this state, the walls we build between ourselves and God begin to crumble. We stop defending ourselves. We stop pretending. We stop explaining. We start being. And in that being, we begin to understand that God is not waiting for us to become worthy. He is waiting for us to become present. In stillness, fear loses its power. Anxiety begins to fade. The urgency that once seemed so important becomes small. The ego that demanded attention becomes quiet. The soul, once buried beneath layers of distraction, begins to rise. It is not a sudden awakening, but a slow emergence. You begin to feel again. You begin to hope again. You begin to trust again, and most of all, you begin to sense that you are not alone, that there is a presence with you, a presence not born of emotion, but of eternal truth. This presence is holy, and yet it draws near to the humble. It is powerful, yet tender. It is vast, yet intimately close. The more you practice stillness, the more you begin to hunger for it. You begin to realize that stillness is not something you do. It becomes who you are. It becomes a way of being, a state of soul. Even in the midst of daily life, even in the busiest moments, you carry this stillness with you like an inner sanctuary. You can return to it with a breath, with a pause, with a quiet acknowledgement of the holy that walks with you. This is the fruit of knowing a holy God, not just moments of inspiration, but a life transformed by sacred presence. Stillness prepares you for transformation, not external transformation first, but internal. You begin to see things differently. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to speak less and listen more. You become less interested in being right and more interested in being real. You stop chasing after things that do not satisfy and begin cherishing the one who satisfies all. This shift is not dramatic on the outside, but it is revolutionary on the inside. It is the kind of change that lasts. It is the kind of change that bears the fruit of holiness in ordinary life. Stillness is the soil where the seeds of divine awareness grow. It is the invitation to step outside of the storm and into the shelter of God's presence. It does not demand effort. It demands surrender, and in that surrender, you do not lose yourself. You find yourself. You find the truth that has always been there. You find the love that has never left. You find the holy that is not far away but closer than breath. And when you know the holy, not just with your mind but with your spirit, everything changes. You walk differently, you see differently, you live differently, because in the stillness you have come to know the one who is holy. Holiness is not something the human mind can fully define or dissect. It is not a concept to be grasped like a formula, nor is it a theory that can be debated into understanding. Holiness is a realm that lies beyond the intellect, beyond human logic, beyond the reach of words. It is not studied, it is not analyzed, it is encountered. To truly know a holy God, you must move from thinking into experiencing, from analyzing into surrendering, from observing from a distance into stepping into the fire. That fire does not consume in destruction, it consumes in purification. It is in that fire of encounter where holiness is revealed, not as an idea, but as a reality that shakes the core of your being and causes every false thing to fall away. In that moment, you don't try to understand holiness. You stand in awe of it. When you encounter holiness, you realize it is not like anything you have ever known. It is not just moral purity, though it contains perfect righteousness. It is not just power, though it commands the entire universe. It is not merely love, though love flows endlessly from it. Holiness is the total otherness of God, His perfection, His majesty, His purity that cannot be tainted. His glory that cannot be shared. When you encounter this, you do not stand tall, you fall, you do not speak many words, you become silent, because holiness reveals not only who God is, but who you are in contrast. And that revelation is not meant to shame you, but to awaken you, to wake you from the illusion that you are self-sufficient, to call you out of the prison of pride and into the freedom of surrender. It is the kind of awakening that doesn't break you down to destroy you. It breaks you to rebuild you. You cannot prepare yourself for the holiness of God with self-effort. You cannot clean yourself up enough to deserve it. Holiness is not given to the qualified. It qualifies the humble. It comes when the soul stops trying to reach God by its own merit and begins to open itself in raw honesty. Encountering holiness is often a disruptive experience. It interrupts your routines, your assumptions, your comforts. It reveals how small and fragile your structures are. It shows you how dependent you truly are. But in that disruption, there is also invitation. A holy God does not reveal himself to condemn. He reveals himself to call you higher, to call you deeper, to call you into a life not measured by human standards, but by divine nearness. The people who have encountered God's holiness throughout history were never the same. Moses removed his sandals and stood trembling before a burning bush. Isaiah cried out, "Woe is me," when he saw the Lord high and lifted up. Paul fell to the ground on the road to Damascus when the glory of Christ blinded him. These were not religious exercises. They were divine invasions, real encounters that changed everything, and the same can be true today. God's holiness is not trapped in ancient texts or historical accounts. It is alive, it is here, and it is seeking hearts that are open, hungry, and willing to encounter, not merely observe. Encountering holiness shifts your entire understanding of God. It removes the shallow, comfortable image of a God who exists to bless your plans. It replaces it with the vision of a king, a creator, a consuming fire who invites you into his presence, not because you deserve it, but because of grace. Grace does not lower the standard of holiness. It lifts you up to stand in it. It clothes you in righteousness so that you can draw near. But drawing near is not casual. It is reverent. It is weighty. It is sacred. And when you realize the weight of what it means to be near a holy God, your worship changes. It becomes more than songs. It becomes posture. It becomes surrender. It becomes awe. The world is full of distractions that pull you away from encounter, endless information, constant noise, but none of these can replace the power of one true moment in the presence of holiness. One moment of encounter will mark you more than 1,000 sermons. It will change your perspective. It will rewire your desires. It will purify your motives. You will not have to try to be holy. You will desire to be holy. You will want to reflect the one you have seen, because when you see holiness, you want to become more like him, not out of obligation, but out of love, not to earn favor, but to express devotion. Knowing a holy God means giving up your right to define him according to your comfort. It means letting him reveal himself as he is, not as you imagine. It means letting go of your theological boxes and letting God be the mystery that he is, yet the mystery that makes himself known. It means being willing to stand before him undone, vulnerable, exposed, and knowing that even in that exposure, you are not rejected but invited closer. Holiness doesn't push you away, it draws you in, even as it humbles you. That's the paradox. The more you see God's holiness, the more aware you are of your weakness, and yet the more welcomed you feel, because holiness is not cold distance. It is radiant love wrapped in purity. This encounter does not happen on demand. You cannot manufacture it, but you can prepare for it. You can posture your heart to be ready. You can make room in your life for stillness, for reverence, for listening. You can choose to remove the clutter and idols that compete for God's place in your soul. And when He comes, when holiness is revealed, everything changes. You begin to see yourself, your calling, your relationships, and your world differently. You begin to live not just for survival or success, but for sanctity. You begin to care less about being noticed by men and more about being known by God. Knowing a holy God through encounter means your life becomes marked by His presence. You become a reflection of what you have seen. You carry a weight that is not burdensome but sacred. You begin to move through the world not with arrogance, but with authority, not because you have power, but because you have been with the one who is power. That encounter becomes your foundation. It becomes your compass. It becomes your identity. You are no longer defined by the past, by sin, by failure. You are defined by the fact that you have seen Him. And once you have seen holiness, you cannot go back. You cannot be satisfied with shadows. You will hunger for light. You will thirst for righteousness. You will pursue the Holy One not just with your mind, but with your whole being. Because you will know He is not just worthy of study, He is worthy of worship. He is worthy of everything. To know a holy God, one must first empty themselves. This is not a concept rooted in weakness or defeat, but in profound spiritual strength. The process of emptying is not about loss, but about making room. A vessel that is already full has no capacity to receive anything more. The same is true of the soul. When we are full of ourselves, our opinions, our plans, our pride, our assumptions, we leave no space for the holy to enter. The holy does not compete for attention. It waits until the heart is emptied enough to recognize that it has nothing without Him. Emptying oneself is not a single act, but a continual posture of surrender. Each day, each moment, there is a choice: to cling or to release, to boast or to bow, to grasp or to open. In the world's eyes, emptying oneself looks like weakness. It goes against everything the world teaches about self: promotion, self-assertion, and self-importance. But the kingdom of God operates differently. It teaches that the way up is down, that the way to victory is through surrender, and that fullness only comes after emptiness. This is not a poetic idea. It is a spiritual law. God cannot fill what is already full, and so He calls us not to be impressive, but to be open. He invites us to come, not with achievements in hand, but with open palms. The invitation is not to bring what we have, but to release what we think we need, and to receive what only He can give. To empty oneself is to acknowledge that God is holy and we are not. It is to lay down the illusion of control, the obsession with certainty, and the desire to always be right. It is to come to the end of ourselves and realize that the end is the beginning. That the moment we run out of strength is the moment we step into His. That the moment we release our need to figure everything out is the moment we receive divine peace. Emptying is painful because it confronts our attachments. It exposes what we trust more than God. It reveals the idols we've built, even unknowingly, our reputation, our understanding, our comfort, our routines. But these things, no matter how noble, can become barriers to true encounter if we cling to them too tightly. There is a freedom in emptiness. It frees you from the exhausting pressure to perform. It releases you from the burden of always needing answers. It opens the soul to mystery. When the ego is quiet, the spirit can speak. When the noise is silenced, the voice of God can be heard, and that voice does not thunder over your pride. It whispers into your humility. It does not force itself into your crowded life. It enters the space you create when you step aside. This is why the empty are often the most full. They are full of grace, full of wisdom, full of light. Because they have made room, they are not overflowing with self. They are overflowing with God. Jesus himself modeled this path. Though equal with God, he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. He did not grasp at status or power, but chose the path of humility. In doing so, he showed us the way to intimacy with the Father. He showed us that true authority is found in surrender, not in domination. If the Son of God chose to empty himself, how much more must we? This emptying is not about erasing your identity. It is about shedding the false self so the true self, made in the image of God, can emerge. It is about letting go of everything that keeps you from becoming who you were always meant to be. There is power in letting go. When you release your agenda, you make space for God's will. When you release your timeline, you invite divine timing. When you release your plans, you begin to trust His purpose. This doesn't mean you live passively. It means you live surrendered. Your actions are no longer driven by fear or pride, but by faith and obedience. Your choices are no longer about self-protection, but about self-giving. In emptying yourself, you do not become nothing. You become available, available to be used, to be led, to be filled, to be transformed. The empty soul is not desperate, it is expectant. It waits with open hands, knowing that God is a generous giver. It trusts that what He fills us with is always better than what we tried to hold on to. It believes that God's presence is worth more than any possession. This kind of emptiness is not hollow. It is sacred. It is the kind of emptiness that invites fullness beyond imagination. It is the kind of emptiness that leads to overflow, not from within, but from above. And this overflow blesses not only you, but everyone around you. It spills into your words, your relationships, your decisions, your atmosphere. There is a discipline to emptying oneself. It requires intention. It means pausing before reacting. It means praying before speaking. It means listening before assuming. It means choosing silence over noise, stillness over striving, obedience over ambition. It is a path of restraint, not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to trust. Strong enough to wait, strong enough to yield. Each act of surrender becomes a doorway through which God's presence enters. Each moment of emptiness becomes a canvas on which the Holy paints something eternal. When you begin to live from a posture of emptiness, you begin to see with new eyes. You see beauty where others see brokenness. You hear whispers of grace in the midst of chaos. You sense the presence of God not only in the sanctuary, but in the mundane, in the unexpected, in the quiet. You begin to walk with reverence, knowing that God is not just found in moments of glory, but in moments of nothingness, in the pause, in the breath, in the stillness between steps. This awareness is the fruit of emptiness. It is the reward of those who choose to let go, to make room to be undone. To know a holy God, you must be willing to be emptied again and again, not because He wants to leave you barren, but because He wants to fill you afresh. The journey of faith is not a one-time event. It is a continual cycle of release and receiving, of bowing low and being lifted high, of pouring out and being filled up. The more you empty yourself, the more you discover that you were never created to live by your own strength. You were made to be a vessel of divine presence, and in being that vessel, you fulfill your greatest purpose, not to make much of yourself, but to reflect the One who is holy. The path to knowing God is not built with achievements or credentials. It is walked by the broken, the humble, the surrendered. It is walked by those who are willing to say, I do not have all the answers, I am not enough on my own, but I am willing to be empty so that you, O God, can be everything in me. This is the true beginning of wisdom. This is the gateway to holiness. This is the only posture from which the holy can be known, and it is from this place of emptiness that the most profound encounter begins. The holy does not reveal itself to the proud, but to the humble. Humility is not weakness, it is strength under control. It is not self-hatred, it is self-forgetfulness. It is the quiet awareness that without God we are nothing, but with Him we have access to everything we truly need. Humility does not demand, it receives. It does not shout, it listens. It does not elevate itself, it bows low. And it is in this low place, this surrendered posture, that the holy God chooses to reveal Himself. Not because He is distant or cruel, but because pride is a barrier, while humility is a doorway. The proud heart builds walls. The humble heart opens windows, and through those windows the light of the holy shines through. To walk humbly is to acknowledge that we do not know everything, that we do not control everything, and that we are not the center of the story. The proud heart wants to make God small enough to fit into its logic. The humble heart makes itself small enough to kneel before His majesty. God is not impressed by our accomplishments, titles, or outward performances. He is drawn to the heart that trembles at His word, to the soul that longs to honor Him, to the spirit that is willing to be led instead of always leading. Humility is not something that can be faked, because the holy discerns motives. It is not found in empty gestures, but in the unseen choices we make. How we speak when no one is listening, how we serve when no one applauds, how we pray when no one is watching. There is a sacred beauty in humility that invites the presence of God. Scripture says He resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Grace is not simply a favor. It is the very presence and power of God working in and through us, and that grace comes when we acknowledge our need. When we stop pretending to have it all together and confess that we are dust without His breath. Holiness and humility walk hand in hand. The more you see the holiness of God, the more you realize your need for Him. The closer you draw to Him, the more you are undone by His glory and remade by His love. This undoing is not a punishment, but a purifying. It removes what is false to reveal what is eternal. Humility gives us eyes to see what others miss. Where pride is blind, humility has vision. It sees the fingerprints of God in moments that seem ordinary. It hears His voice in the whisper of the wind. It senses His nearness in silence. Pride wants to dominate, to control, to be right. But humility wants to learn, to yield, to become. And in the becoming, the holy begins to form something new within us, something pure, something radiant, something true. The proud may build kingdoms, but the humble inherit them. The proud may gain applause, but the humble gain access to the throne, to the presence, to the heart of God. The world values boldness, confidence, and power, but heaven values meekness, brokenness, and surrender. This is not because boldness is wrong, but because without humility, boldness becomes arrogance. Without humility, confidence becomes self-reliance. Without humility, power becomes abuse. But humility sanctifies boldness. It anchors confidence in grace. It uses power to serve, not to dominate. This is the way of the holy. It is not loud and flashy. It is quiet and deep. It is not showy. It is sacred. And those who desire to walk with God must learn this way, not from books or lectures, but from the inner work of the Spirit who humbles us in love. Humility opens our ears to correction and our hearts to change. It removes the need to always defend ourselves, always win the argument, always prove a point. It allows us to admit when we are wrong, to ask for forgiveness, to forgive quickly. These are not small things. These are sacred acts. They are evidence of a heart that is not ruled by ego but guided by reverence. And in this kind of heart the Holy makes his dwelling. He does not inhabit the hearts of those who demand his presence, but of those who wait for it with trembling. Not in fear, but in awe, not in dread, but in desire. The greatest spiritual transformations happen not in the heights of achievement, but in the depths of surrender. When we come to the end of ourselves, we come to the beginning of God. Humility is that end. It is the quiet confession that we cannot save ourselves, fix ourselves, or glorify ourselves. It is the surrender of our own name to lift up His, and in that lifting we find our true identity. The world teaches us to build our brand. The Spirit teaches us to carry our cross. One leads to temporary applause. The other leads to eternal glory. The humble recognize that they are stewards, not owners. That every gift, every breath, every opportunity is not earned but given, and what is given must be handled with reverence. Pride takes credit. Humility gives thanks. Pride hoards. Humility shares. Pride seeks to be above. Humility chooses to serve. In this kind of living, we reflect the very nature of Christ, who humbled himself even to death, and because of his humility, he was exalted. This is not just a story to admire, it is a path to walk, a way to live, a truth to embody. When the holy reveals itself in humility, it comes gently, but with power. It does not dazzle the eyes. It transforms the heart. It does not demand attention. It captures devotion. The most powerful experiences of God's presence often happen not in the noise of a crowd, but in the quiet surrender of a solitary soul. That soul may be broken, unsure, unqualified, but if it is humble, it is ready. Ready to receive, ready to obey, ready to be made new. Humility creates space for holiness to dwell. It invites God not just to visit, but to remain, not just to touch us, but to transform us. And this transformation is not for personal pride. It is for God's glory. The humble do not seek to shine. They seek to reflect, and in their reflection, the world sees the beauty of the one they have encountered. This is how revival begins, not with noise, but with kneeling. Not with platform, but with purity. Not with charisma, but with character. And character is forged in the fire of humility. To know a holy God is to become small before Him, not because we are worthless, but because He is worthy. And in that smallness we are lifted, in that bowing we are raised, not in human terms, but in holy ones. The revelation of the holy is not earned, it is received, and the ones who receive it are not those who fight for it, but those who kneel for it. Those who lower themselves enough to be filled. Those who love His presence more than their pride. Those who understand that in the eyes of the world they may seem weak, but in the eyes of heaven they are strong, because they have chosen the path of humility, and on that path the Holy walks with them.